Good evening. Tonight's Overview and Scrutiny Committee held here in the Council Chamber. Thank you for attending. I'll move on to the agenda. Item number 1 is any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, there have been 6 apologies, from Councillors Cousins, King, Ryby, Raper, Rain and Garbutt-Moore.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 are the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of November 2021, and I move that these are noted as a true record of the minutes. Is that correct? Can we go by general affirmation? Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just check? Sorry, Chair. I'm being told there's no picture on the live stream, only sound. If that could be rectified, please. Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 3, which is urgent business. To receive notice of any urgent business which I consider should be dealt with at the meeting as a matter of urgency. I've not received any urgent business, or does... No, okay, thank you. And number 4, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to indicate whether they would be declaring any interests under the Code of Conduct? Members making a declaration of interest at the meeting of a committee are required to disclose the existence and nature of that interest. The requirement is not discharged by merely declaring a personal interest without a further explanation. Do any members have any interest to disclose? No interest to disclose. Moving on to agenda item number 5. The Chair of Council has been invited to attend under the overview and scrutiny provisions in the Constitution to answer questions on her decision to postpone the meeting of full Council scheduled for the 2nd of December 2021. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Frank for attending. It was by invitation and she didn't have to attend. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure the people that have put the questions forward will appreciate that as well. I think there's other councillors have questions, but I've been given some by both members of the public and councillors, so I've amalgamated them, and just to make it as succinct as possible. So, Councillor Frank, the first one. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to ask a question, really, for protocol and through Simon, just to clarify why we've called Councillor Frank here, because I think it's only fair that we say the rationale behind why or what we're looking into and what we hope to achieve by doing this process. I think it's only fair.
I think if you'd have waited for me, I'd have...
I do apologise.
Okay. But Simon, if you want to answer that, that's fine.
Just to summarise, Chair, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee can ask any individual to come along to answer questions, obviously with the consent of that individual, and a member of the committee had put in a request that Councillor Frank be invited to answer questions relating to her decision to postpone the meeting of full council on the 2nd of December. Thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah. Oh. Right, Councillor Frank. It's been brought up that Article 5 of the Constitution relates to your role as the chairman, and one of the roles is to uphold and promote the purposes of the Constitution and to interpret when necessary. Obviously, you use that option. You've made the decision to cancel a full council meeting at short notice. Could you tell us what reasoning evidence you base this decision on and what made you interpret the Constitution as you did?
As chair of this council, I have a personal responsibility and liability with regard to the safe running of the meeting. And this is I treat this with the utmost seriousness. And with the unknowns of the Omicron virus at that time, and the number of cases of COVID being higher in Rydale than anywhere else in North Yorkshire that week, and leaders of 5 groups having the same concerns, the health of our members and staff were paramount.
So where did you get the evidence from for the numbers being higher? Because I think various people have brought to my attention that the numbers were actually down in Rydale that week, and at the time, the new variant, obviously we can look back now and say it may have been the right decision, but at the time, where did the evidence come from for that? From the 5 team leaders, party leaders?
It was on the County Council's website. It's on every week. It's on the County Council's website, the numbers in each council.
Yes, that has been brought to my attention by other councillors, but they have a different view on it, that the numbers were down 27% that week for COVID numbers. So no matter how they were in other areas, we had held council meetings previously when numbers were higher.
My information at that time was that the numbers were higher in Rydale than anywhere else in North Yorkshire.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. The second point that's been made is we as councillors on the whole were sent a questionnaire to complete on whether we thought attendance was possible and if we were happy with attending with the health and safety measures in place. I've been asked to know, to find out, if possible, if you took these results into consideration, and if not, why didn't you, and how was the decision democratic if these weren't taken into account?
Well, actually, no, I didn't take those figures into account. The new Omicron variant of COVID was at that time a complete unknown. Chris Whitty said that Omicron is a severe threat, and that things we do know about it were all bad. And so I had to factor that into what was being said. Omicron wasn't even mentioned when that survey was taken.
I do believe, I'd have to double check, I think the survey came out a couple of days before the meeting, and I think Omicron was known about then. And I think that was why it was sent out, but Simon would have to clarify that. So I think my concern, and the concern of many councillors that has been brought to me, is that we were sent a questionnaire and asked for our view, and it was just totally disregarded because the majority, or so I've been informed, I may be wrong, that's why I haven't seen the results, the majority said that they did fill in, that they would be happy to attend the meeting with the health and safety measures in place that had been in place at previous ones. So thank you for answering that you didn't take them into consideration.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
All 5 group leaders were of the same, had the same concerns as I had at that time, on that day.
Yes, Councillor Frank, I'm aware that the group leaders, I don't think all of the group leaders actually, I think. Bar one, which there is a lot of councillors in that group. But yes, I'm aware that the group leaders decided that. But
no,
as I say,
decision.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Frank. Simon, would it be possible to find out when that questionnaire went out?
I think, speaking from memory, it went out on the Tuesday before full council. It was towards the start of that week, certainly, so a couple of days beforehand.
The second point that's been brought to my attention to ask you about is Article 5 again in your role as chairman, and it was Article 5.2, I believe. Another aspect of your role is to preside over meetings so that the business can be carried out efficiently and with regards to the rights of the councillors and the interests of the community. It appears, and it's been brought to my attention again, that the decision to cancel full council at the last minute breached both of these functions. The cost of the aborted meeting has been reported to be in the region of £3,500, and obviously the re-adjourned meeting costs will be added to this. Please explain how you believe this is efficient or cost-effective for the residents when we are at such a crucial time in Rydals District Council with the reorganisation.
I requested that meeting be postponed after 4 group leaders raised concerns about the attendance of vulnerable members at the meeting and the unknown risk of the new variant of COVID. Subsequently, the other 2 group leaders were consulted and one shared these concerns. I was advised that I could postpone the meeting under Council Procedure Rule 26, which Council Procedure Rule 24 applies to full council. If for good reasons I considered that the date fixed was inconvenient for the dispatch of business, I confirmed that this was my decision and that the date fixed was inconvenient for the dispatch of business, owing to the concerns about the attendance of vulnerable members at the meeting and the unknown risk posed by the new variant of COVID.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. I think I don't know this. This is something I've been asked to ask again. Is that apparently there was 5 people had already given their apologies for absence due to the vulnerability, and I understand that because I know that some people are very vulnerable at the moment. But the full council would still have been quorate. We could go down to a lot less attendees than that to have a quorate council. So the question has been put to me that why did you make that decision on the basis that just even if just 6 or 7 members couldn't attend, and the others were willing to attend and they weren't vulnerable?
I can't see how you can say that anybody wasn't vulnerable. We're all vulnerable to this virus, and I think that meetings should be all inclusive. I don't believe that we should run meetings where, as tonight, you know, which groups are not represented tonight. How many people have cancelled tonight? How many people wouldn't have come to that meeting? How many people didn't feel safe? Our councillors ought to feel comfortable and safe in a meeting, and it's not right to run a meeting if they don't.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. I think there seems to be some debate at the moment about what's safe and what's not, because some councillors that have chosen to come tonight have also attended meetings in the past week. They're still running their businesses, they're still having people attending, they're still going to work, but then they say that they can't attend a small meeting such as this due to the vulnerability, which obviously is a personal preference. But I think if you're going to do one thing, you should stick to that. So whilst I understand what you're saying, I don't think you should just cancel the council meetings because a certain amount of people can't attend. But thank you for answering the question. Has anybody else got any questions before I continue?
Is that the end of question?
No, Councillor. Councillor Oxley.
Councillor Middleton, thank you. First, I'd like to thank Councillor Frank for coming this evening and understand that it was an invite, and I'm delighted that she's taken it and chosen to come to the meeting. I think we've already covered most of the points, the key points that people have raised on the back of this. In that clearly, you know, that decision was taken after representation by a number of group leaders. In terms of the professional advice, because we'd had the survey 48 hours before, we had clearly professional advice from our officers and the professional people they speak to that the meeting was safe to go ahead. I just wonder, you know, were you aware of all that advice at the time? Who had been consulted, what their professional advice was, you know, what the officers were actually saying, that this is a safe meeting before you took the decision?
Well, I did take legal advice. We did take legal advice on this, so that it was definitely a legal decision to make.
So a legal decision in terms of the Constitution, i.e. you have the right to cancel the meeting, but what about the professional legal advice that led to that decision? Because as I understand it, and I may not have seen all the pieces of paper, but as I understand it, there was clear guidance that in terms of the experts we speak to, this was a meeting that could have gone ahead.
Well, I can only reiterate what I've said. Staff's health and members' health is paramount to my responsibility on this council. I read out at the beginning of council meetings that it's my responsibility and liability with regard to the safe running of the meeting. At that time, with this Omicron variant of COVID in its infancy, I didn't consider that it was safe for councillors to come into that meeting. That was, while it was my responsibility, and I think my decision's really been vindicated by the LGA. They agree that it's not safe at this time to have face-to-face meetings, and they're lobbying government at this time to put meetings back on Zoom, so that we don't have to come into face-to-face meetings.
Yeah, but going back to the 2nd of December, there was no government advice to stop having meetings. My understanding is there was no professional advice to officers in this council to stop having meetings. The rules and regulations were in place. It was the only way we could have those meetings because of the government advice hadn't changed. So that advice was overruled
By me.
By you, and in discussion with some of the group leaders who represent members on this council. I haven't got a problem with that, but that seems to me that's what actually happened.
Well, I think all I can say is I was ahead of the game as things have gone over the last 2 weeks. I was ahead of the game, and if
yeah, but those rules still haven't changed in terms of meetings and government advice. I don't just one other point, if I may, and it just touches onto something that the chair's already raised with you. As I said, there was no advice, no guidance coming from government or from experts. We had people, there was an assumption made that people weren't coming to the meeting. The vast majority of the members, I still believe, were happy to come to that meeting. You know, because it was laid down that is what they could do. I am well aware of the fact that a number of members who everybody seems to think would not have come to that meeting are going about their normal business, are coming into Malton, Pickering and places, have come to sub-meetings of this council and have gone to other meetings of councils. Yeah? In the time immediately after, they apparently was deemed that they would not feel safe to come to this council meeting. And I actually think that that is something that the decision was taken, I believe, when there were 30 members of this council, and we had no idea. As far as we knew, only 5 were not coming, and we had many a council meeting where we've had more than 5 apologies. And it just seems to me to, you know, the vast majority of members had filled in the questionnaire, they understood the rules, but they weren't given the chance to come to the meeting. That was an absolutely vital meeting, and this decision has pushed the work of this council back by months at a time when it's absolutely vital that we get on and do things. You know, that's the way I see it. I just would like a comment on that.
Well, the crux of the matter is we just don't know the severity of Omicron. So surely caution's the best judgment at this time. I considered it was to be the best judgment at that time. It was my decision.
Fine,
and I made that decision.
But not the judgment
with the
of the government's
concerns of staff and members' health and well-being.
Fine. Just one final point to pick up then. I mean, Councillor Middleton has raised the possibility of the potential of the costs of this. I suspect the total cost of this, by the time we've reorganised and organised other meetings and all that goes with it, is going to be closer to £10,000 than £3,000. That's a fairly significant chunk of money for this council. Was that weighed in the balance when the decision was taken, the financial consequences?
No, I was more concerned about the health and well-being of our members than the cost to the council at the time. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, don't apologise for being concerned about their welfare. I just think it would have been nice if they'd been given a chance to have their own views. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frank, I'll just, if I can, just come back on something you said about if we could have seen back. At the time, I think there was only 8 cases of Omicron in the whole country, and there was no advice from any departments that we shouldn't be holding meetings. So I wish that we can foresee such events in the future and use your opinion on that then. Councillor Wass.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Frank, for coming this evening. From my point of view, personally, I do feel that after the event and the decision was made, there was a lack of clarity, and I'm not blaming any one person or persons for this, but the sort of communication as to really why the meeting didn't go ahead wasn't really quite clear to me. You know, you go along with what you're told to do, admittedly, and we filled in the questionnaires, as Councillor Middleton has said, but I just didn't really get the feeling there was a purpose in the decision. It was just a decision was made, but it didn't seem to really have any real clarity to it. I don't know whether you want to expand on the communication afterwards, please.
Well, no, not really, because I think I think Simon would send out the email that explained that it had been cancelled and why it was sent out from Democratic Services.
Okay. Would you feel, I mean, you've taken a lot of onus yourself, really, as to why you made the decision you did, and I don't think any which way is an easy decision to make. But would you say we need better clarity from the government as to what we should be doing rather than us trying to second-guess what's going to happen?
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely the nail on the head. The LGA at the moment are trying to lobby this government, but the information they're putting out is definitely muddled and not at all clear. And in the meantime, this virus is spreading, is doubling each day, and people are dying, and people and the scare is that the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed again, particularly over Christmas. The hospitals are going to be overwhelmed by people with coronavirus and Omicron. That's what's being said. That's what. I just think that this government are slow to react, absolutely slow to react to anything.
Could I just interrupt there, because I think that's pretty relevant to what we're discussing now, because we're discussing something that happened over 2 weeks ago, and there was nothing came from the government council meeting, so I don't see why it's relevant now. We're just wasting a bit of time, I think.
Just another question as well, if I could, probably for Simon to answer though. If the council is not meeting, do we therefore go back into emergency powers and the chief executive takes over?
In terms of the business that is pending for the postponed meeting of council, there's not a tight time deadline on determining any of those items, so we don't need to make decisions on them immediately, which allows the options for rescheduling in the new year. Clearly in the Constitution there are urgency powers which can be used in the event that elected members can't meet safely, but in my view we don't need to invoke those currently to deal with the business from the 2nd of December.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Can I just add to that, Simon? I don't know quite how we stand, but York Council actually cancelled their meeting on Tuesday, and they're going to have online meetings, so I don't understand why we can't have online meetings.
Do you want me to comment on that, Chair? I understand City of York Council are using urgency powers, and the online meetings are effectively consultative meetings with elected members because, as we've already mentioned, virtual meetings are no longer lawful within England. The legislation that allowed them expired in April, so that's how City of York are dealing with their business currently, with an online element.
So does that mean that we could have online meetings and then them be ratified by our chief executive?
I think we're going off the subject again because I've still got another question.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Frank,
sorry. Councillor Middleton.
Under Article 6.1, it relates to the role of ONS. We're here to scrutinise and review local democracy and the achievement of effective, transparent and accountable decision-making by the Council, which is why, amongst other reasons, we asked you to come today. Just to reiterate, numerous people have contacted not only myself but other councillors, and they've been on social media ranting about the lack of democracy involved in this decision to cancel the meeting, and obviously it doesn't give us good press that they think councillors are all in agreement against the public, what they want, and the last minute cancellation of that meeting I don't think has done anybody any favours. I don't know if, obviously with Rydal District Council's coming to an end, but I think for one person, even though you are chair of the council and you've been voted in that, to be able to cancel meetings at such short notice would have had to have been looked at in the Constitution if we were to be proceeding. But I do thank you for coming in and thank you for answering the questions in your honest way. And I think we'll just have to agree that other people disagree with that decision, and it's cost the council a lot of money. And I think Councillor Oxley has another question.
If we're just now we seem to be asking Simon questions. I'd just like a confirmation, if I could. My understanding is that the officers felt the meeting was safe to go ahead, and at no time did they actually recommend it should be cancelled. Is that the case, Simon?
For all meetings, we have a health and safety risk assessment, which is a live document reviewed on a continuous basis, and we put safeguards in place in consultation with our health and safety experts who provide advice to the council. There was a risk assessment in place with safeguards for the meeting on the 2nd of December, so that we would be able to proceed with the necessary safeguards in place if that was the wish of members.
Thank you.
Simon, just while Councillor Franks is still here, could you, I noticed, had a date been put forward for the end of February for the next meeting?
There's currently discussions ongoing with Councillor Frank as the Chair of Council and Group Leaders about rescheduling the business from the 2nd of December. In February, there's 2 dates, always in the timetable of meetings, because we have a reserve date in February for a full council. So one option is to schedule the business to take place using those 2 dates, but those discussions are ongoing and not yet concluded.
Is there a reason why it's so far in advance? I mean, that's 2.5 months since.
I think there's some limitations around venue availability, which, with needing to be in a larger off-site venue as part of the social distancing arrangements, does restrict options. Also, some of the uncertainty around what the COVID situation may be in January has been raised in discussions.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Councillor Frank. I don't think anybody else has got any more questions. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Moving on the agenda to item number 6, which is the 2020 to 21 audit findings report. And I think, does this go to Anton? Good evening, Anton.
Good evening. Can I just check you can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Good, thank you. And also Gareth and Talina are here from Grant Thornton, our external auditors. So it'll be a bit of a joint act. This paper really number of attachments. So I'll start off if I can before handing over, I think, to Gareth in the first instance. So this is the annual noting of the statement of accounts. I think the committee is aware that over the last couple of years there have been timing issues, capacity issues in terms of finalising the audit of the accounts. I'm sure Gareth will comment on that, but we still do bring the accounts, the statement of accounts to this committee, and then it goes on for final approval. This year, that approval's been delegated to myself, a Section 151 officer, in consultation with the all group leaders. So I'm sure Gareth will talk a bit more about that, and in terms of the accounts themselves. What I'd like just to do very briefly is run through the first document that you have, which is called Informing the Audit Risk Assessment Presentation. It is a presentation, but don't worry, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint, and I'm sure that's something you're welcome in terms of the kind of details of this. But just want to point out that this is actually is not something that you will have seen before. This is something new for you to have a look at. It highlights really details of how we manage the audit, how the evidence that we present to the external auditors, and that helps with, as you'll see in the presentation itself, how to contribute towards communication, if you like, between the external auditors and the audit committee. So this is something new. I'm sorry, can I just check you can still hear me, because the picture I'm seeing of you is quite old now.
Yes, Anton, we can still hear you.
Okay, right. I think there's problem. Yeah, good. Okay. I'm seeing footage of the meeting of about 10 minutes ago for some reason, so I'm not sure that can be sorted out. But nevertheless, as long as you can still hear me, I'll keep going. So this is a detailed document which highlights to the committee some of the evidence that we present. I'm not going to go through all of it in great detail, but it highlights some of the key issues which, as a committee, you are already well aware of. For example, there's a section there about fraud and how we manage fraud. There's a section in there about risk management, and particularly risk management in terms of legal issues. There's also quite detailed information in terms of how we apply various principles to things like property and investments, and that links to treasury management again, which you will see through the course of the year. So it's all most of it is it touches on the stuff that you already look at the committee. There are some additional things in there, like there's something called related party transactions, which is really about ensuring propriety of members and officers in terms of behaviour and particularly in terms of the financial impact. So I think that's all I want to say about this. There are links to various documents, many of which you will have seen before as well, which you'll be able to click on the electronic version of the agenda. But that's really all I wanted to say about this particular document. I'm happy to answer any questions, but perhaps I can hand over to Gareth either to talk about that or indeed the statement itself, and no doubt Gareth will talk about their own opinion.
Thank you, Anton.
Evening, Chair. Evening, everyone. Happy to just to add to Anton's comments there on this particular paper. So this paper is really looking at the key areas that inform management's judgment in terms of pulling the accounts together. And there's an increased focus on that from external auditors this year. There was an updated auditing standard, ISO 540, which requested auditors to challenge and understand management's sort of estimates and judgments more this year than perhaps have been done in the past, and that's led to the document that Anton's just taking you through there. So he's basically setting out, you know, his risk assessment, his understanding of the various issues, his judgments, and in terms of how he's arrived at certain estimates in this year's accounts. And it's appropriate practice for Anton to then share that with you as those charged with governance, if you like, on this committee, to review Anton's proposals and I guess comment and challenge or indeed endorse the judgments that Anton has come to as Section 151 officer. So I suppose that's all I would say in relation to that paper, but obviously I'll take you through the ISO 260 when we get to that point slightly later on this agenda item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is it back to Anton? No. Back to Anton.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's all I really wanted to say in terms of that piece. I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Otherwise, I'd suggest that we then move on to the statement of accounts themselves and the ISO 260 and hand over back to Gareth.
Is there any questions?
If I,
Councillor Oxley.
yeah, just interest. I mean, this is as you say, it's a different document. It's a new document. It has things in it that we haven't seen before, and from what Gareth said, it is looking at things that maybe haven't been looked at before. Is it just safe to assume that is the reason for that is that we are tidying up things that weren't done before, or that the nasty world out there is getting so bad that we're having to look at things that we haven't looked at before? Or am I misunderstanding, Gareth?
It's a good question, Councillor. So, in essence, some of the questions in that document are things that we've typically asked Anton of in the past, to get a view from him as Section 151 officer to help inform our audit approach and audit strategy. There are some elements where I suppose we've gone a bit further this year, and that's mainly around the fact that there's a new international auditing standard that's been issued with effect from 2021 financial accounts. And I suppose that links, mainly to, the commercial world and some of the challenges of commercial businesses in the current climate. But nevertheless, they're equally applied to public sector entities, hence why we're having this discussion on this particular item this evening. And I think the bit that is a bit different this year is that is the sort of governance behind it being shared with you as elected members to have the opportunity to look through in a bit more detail perhaps than you've done in the past around some of the key bits of information that Anton uses when he compiles the accounts and reaches the judgments and estimates that he does in those accounts. It's the underpinning basis for why he's arrived at some of those that are included in this document, and it's bringing it, to your attention as elected members to help inform your understanding of the council's accounts, and if necessary, question or challenge Anton's judgments that he's arrived at.
Thank you.
Would you like to carry on with your report, Anton?
Yeah, I think now I'll hand back over to Gareth in terms of going through the rest of it. That's okay?
Thank you. Sorry, yes, I remember you saying that now.
That's okay.
Thank you, Anton, and thank you, Chair. So I think that the next key document to probably talk through is the ISO 260 audit findings report, which I think is in pack page 167 of 204. So this is, one of our key reports of the year for the council. And in essence, it's a summary of the key findings from our accounts audit work that we've performed on the 2021 financial statements. Now, we've badged this on the front page there, working draft for audit committee, and I suppose I'll explain a bit of the context behind why it's been sort of headed up on that basis. So if you turn to page 169, that's headed up headlines, you'll see there some of the key messages from our work. So we've performed the work from August onwards. We haven't identified any audit adjustments that impact on the council's level of usable reserves, or if you like, the bottom line of the council. So that's a really important finding. That so it means that there haven't been any audit adjustments that would impact on the level of reserves available to you as a council. To date, there's only a small number of presentational changes that we've identified. And we haven't identified any recommendations from the audit work to date. Now, our work is still ongoing. We're doing all we can to try and reach a conclusion on this audit by the end of tomorrow. But there is a chance that it may go through into the early part of January in terms of my actual sign-off of the audit. So again, just a bit of context for that. I think we spoke previously in April and indeed in the summer, where we were never planning to sign this audit off at the end of September. We planned initially to conclude the audit at the end of November, and I know we reported that on a couple of occasions to you. Unfortunately, one of our lead auditors decided to move on from public sector audit at Grant Thornton to another role at a different organisation, and that really impacted on our ability to deliver the audit to the end of November as we'd originally planned. And as I said earlier in the year, this was entirely, my call to make sure that we could deliver the audit opinion in an appropriate, efficient manner. And the fact that it needed to be delayed was in no way a reflection of Anton and his team in the finance team, or indeed of Rydale as a whole. And there is a wider context at the minute to, I guess, the significant pressures that the public sector external audit market is under. You may have seen reference to the fact that only 9% of local authorities had a signed set of accounts by the end of September. And there's been a national review by Sir Tony Redmond called the Redmond Review into some of the challenges facing external audit. And I've discussed this with Anton and with Stacey, and Talia and I are more than happy to run a workshop perhaps at a future audit committee meeting early in the new year to provide some more detail behind that context. So I suppose in essence, the bulleted list of areas that were still outstanding on page 169 are listed there. Some of these have moved on since this report was finalised around about 10 days ago. So we now have the letter of assurance from the auditor of the pension fund from colleagues at Deloitte. So we've now received that. A lot of audit work has been done over the past sort of 2 or 3 weeks, particularly in the key risk areas of pension fund and the valuation of your land and buildings, which is good because they are the sort of key risk areas of the audit. And again, very grateful to Anton and his team for their engagement with us and the turnaround time to deal with any queries we have. As I say, it is going to be quite tight tomorrow because there is quite a bit of work ongoing in a small number of areas around journals and debtors and creditors, which I do think means that the sign off of these accounts from our side is likely to be done directly with Anton very early in the new year. So if we just turn the page onto page 170, alongside the accounts opinion, most members will be familiar that we also report on the value for money arrangements of the council. Now, again, this year, that particular review is a new approach that the NAO has brought in. It's a more broader scope of review than we've done in the past, and to reflect the fact that on 2 things really. One, that the review is more broader, and secondly, the fact that external audit firms across the country are under a lot of pressure and they want us to focus on delivering the accounts opinion first. They've effectively decoupled the audit opinion timetable for the value for money work from the accounts work. So we're required to conclude that work within 3 months of the accounts opinion. Clearly, it's not in your interest or our interest to take that full 3-month period. So myself and Talina, we've already made some good progress on the value for money work. And again, thanks to Anton and other colleagues that have fed into that. And we are hoping to conclude that by the end of February. So within sort of a month to 6 weeks of the opinion date. I think the key thing for members to recognise this evening is that there are no significant weaknesses in the council's arrangements, in our opinion, in terms of your value for money arrangements that would preclude my ability to issue my audit opinion on your accounts. So I think we also highlight on that page, in terms of acknowledgement, I guess the understanding and patience of officers and members for that later timetable. And we do appreciate your understanding on that. Then in section 2 of this report, Chair, it goes into a bit more detail in terms of our accounts audit. It's important to point out on page 172 that we've updated our materiality figure for Rydale. So in our original plan that we produced back in April, we had a materiality figure of 438k. And on receipt of your draft accounts in the summer, we recalculated that, and there was a bit of a movement there. So our revised materiality figure is just over 530,000, and we use that to drive our audit testing. Significant risks then follow from page 173 onwards. So management overrider controls is a consistent significant risk across all audits. No significant issues identified to date, and that's still the case as of today's date, although certain work is still ongoing in that area. Income and expenditure fraud recognition on page 174. Again, no issues to draw to your attention to date from that work. Valuation of land and buildings, including investment properties, is set out on 175, and that is a real sort of key area of focus for the audit, as most members will be familiar with. So we've done an awful lot of work there with council officers and with your valuation specialist who's based at York Council. And ultimately, we're satisfied with the work done in that area. The valuer has reported a material uncertainty across the council's asset valuation as a result of COVID. Members may recall that a similar thing was identified last year. So again, as per last year, I'll be drawing attention to that, in my opinion, in what's known as an emphasis of matter. So just drawing it out to any readers of the accounts, given the significance of that. The valuation of your share of the pension fund is summarised on page 176. We have now got that assurance letter from Deloitte, so that work is pretty much completed now, and there are no issues arising, which is again is a key finding, because that is one of the key areas of our audit focus. We look at estimates and judgments as well, and then rate them on a scale. Based on the work we've done to date, there are no issues that cause us any concern, so we've flagged them as green rated in terms of your valuations, pension fund, and your accounting for grants, and we will just firm that up and conclude on that at the point that we issue our audit opinion. Just turning over the pages, the next point to point out is probably on pack page 185 in section 3. So this again just summarises that there aren't any significant VFM weaknesses based on the work that we've done to date on the value for money arrangements review, and therefore there's nothing to stop me signing the accounts opinion once we've completed our work. Section 4 of the report looks at independence and the ethical standards, which obviously is a very important area for external audit. So just to be really upfront and transparent, we are required to highlight any additional audit fees that we have over and above the standard work that we do on the accounts. So there are two key areas to point out. These are consistent with prior year. One is that we certify your housing benefit claim, so that work has just commenced, and again that's targeted to be concluded by the end of January. And then you also subscribe to an analytics subscription called Place Analytics and CFO Insights. Again, it's something that you've subscribed to for a number of years now, which Grant Thornton run. And it's just less than £4,000, but that's dealt with entirely separate from myself and Talina and the audit. We're then into the appendices, Chair. So at the time that we drafted this report, there were no recommendations to include in the action plan. There may well be one or two at the point that we sign off, and again we'll discuss those with Anton accordingly. We followed up the prior year recommendations in Appendix B on page 190 and 191 and satisfied that the Council's taken appropriate action against the recommendations that we raised in the previous 2 years, which is good. Appendix C is the audit adjustments. So again, page 192, really important to highlight that we've not found any adjustments thus far that impact on your usable reserves. That's a really important point. And just a small number of disclosure changes on 193. Again, that list may slightly increase at the point that we sign off, and we will update this report as at the date of our audit opinion. But overall, based on the work that we've done thus far, generally a good set of accounts and working papers have been provided by Anton and his team, and a good level of engagement with us. And as I say, appreciate the sort of understanding and patience of officers in terms of this year's audit timetable. Our audit fees are in Appendix D on page 195, and again they are all as per the audit plan back in April, so nothing to report there in terms of any changes. And then Appendix E is the proposed opinion that I will sign once our audit work is all concluded. Appreciate that's quite a wordy document, but in essence it's a clean, unqualified opinion, which is the opinion that all sort of Section 151 officers and local authorities would like to see. Effectively a clean bill of health from the audit's point of view, but there will be that emphasis of matter, drawing attention to that material uncertainty on the valuations of land and buildings and investment properties, which your valuer has reported in his work. Appendix F is the letter that I sent to you, Chair, towards the end of September that just highlighted the fact that the VFM work was effectively being decoupled from the accounts audit, and again that's consistent with all our audits this year. So appreciate that it's quite a detailed document, is this, Chair, but it's probably alongside the annual auditor's report, which we'll be doing by the end of February. It's one of the sort of two key documents of the external audit year. As I say, overall, the audit has gone very well to date. No real significant issues arising. We'll be virtually there, I think, by the end of tomorrow, with the exception of a bit of work around debtors and creditors. And I think we'll be seeking to sign off as soon as possible through engagement with Anton very early in January. So that's, I guess, the summary on the ISO 260, Chair. But obviously, Talina and I'll try and answer any questions you or other colleagues may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth, for your work. Is there any questions? Councillor Wass.
Hi, Gareth, and Anton and your colleague. Thank you for your time and a detailed report. You mentioned the workshops. Maybe you need to spend time giving workshops to the other councils that can't meet the deadlines, but there you go. You mentioned the asset valuation. Why should COVID change this? You know, we kind of are getting further down the line in terms of back to work and everything being more in place, current situations pending, obviously, but could you just expand why that has been a problem?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wass. Good question. I suppose on the first point, you know, in terms of the timing of audits, I think, you know, Rydale and most councils did indeed provide the draft accounts to auditors on time, as indeed you did as a council. The issue is basically a lack of public sector audit specialists to deliver 500 local authorities in the timescale that the government has set. And again, Talina and I can. Sorry, I'm hearing myself coming back a bit, Councillor Wass, at the minute. Oh, that's better. As I say, Talina and I are more than happy to run a session on that to explain some of the context. In terms of the valuation challenges as a result of COVID, last year, so in the 1920 accounts, there was a direct edict from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, or RICS, to all their members, of which most local authority and NHS expert valuers are members, that said you must issue a material uncertainty as a result of COVID on any valuation work that you perform. So that was across the board last year. For 2021 accounts, which are the ones obviously we're looking at this evening, that sort of blanket edict from RICS was actually dropped, Councillor Wass. So it is a bit of a mix and match approach this year, if I'm being brutally honest. So certain valuers have dropped any material uncertainty from their valuation and justified that accordingly to both to their client, which in this case is Anton as management, and also to the external auditors, and others such as Rydale's valuation specialist, who's, as I say, based at York Council. In his expert opinion, he still believes that COVID has created enough uncertainty on asset valuations to maintain that particular uncertainty paragraph in his valuation. Now, Talina and I have clearly challenged back to your valuer on that and said, there's no blanket requirement this year. Why do you believe that to be the case? He's come back and said, that in his professional expert view, there's still enough uncertainty in terms of the asset base at Rydale at 31st of March that there is a material uncertainty there. And I suppose you have to remember that the materiality level at Rydale of just over £500,000, in proportion to the size of your asset base, it doesn't take much for things to become materially an issue, if you like, because obviously you've got several £1 million worth of valuation of assets, and only a small movement in that could potentially become a material issue. So in essence, I guess they are the experts, the valuers. I'm not a valuation specialist, and nor is Anton. We've challenged the valuer's judgment, and he's sort of justified it further that in his view that valuation uncertainty needs to be maintained at Rydale. And ultimately, management and ourselves have accepted that, and then we've taken the necessary action. So management's action is that they include a disclosure note in the accounts, which you'll see around that material uncertainty on land and buildings and on investment properties. And our action is to include the material uncertainty paragraph in the opinion.
That's good, thank you. Just on the valuation of land and buildings, I was looking through the reports. It's probably me, obviously, but Rydale does own quite a lot of properties apart from the buildings, where people are actually working from, but they get accrue revenues and things. I couldn't find anywhere though that deals with insurance. What does that fall under?
It might be possibly one for Ant on this, but obviously, there will be insurance costs. Obviously, council does take out insurance, and there will be relevant expenditure in year in terms of insurance coverage, and on a sample basis that may be picked up on our sampling of sort of operating expenditure of the council. But in terms of the detail behind sort of insurance over those assets, it might be one more for management that.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find it. There will be some stuff in there, Councillor Watts, but I can look that out and get some information to you, if that's okay.
It was just to get a rough idea of what it comes under. Is it hidden for a reason? I'm not saying it's hidden, but why I couldn't find it, and just to make sure that we are covered. I know we will be, but it's just one of those things. When I was going through, and it's obviously I was just looking for insurance, but obviously it's not as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, Councillor Watts, that obviously local authority accounts are highly unusual, shall we say, in terms of how they're presented. So you're absolutely right. If you went to Joe Blogg and Son Limited down the road and you looked at their profit and loss account, there would be a line in their expenditure that probably said insurance, and you'd be able to see exactly how much they'd spent on insurance in year. It's not quite as easily transparent, things like that in local authority accounts. There's a very prescribed presentation required by the SIPFA accounting code, which obviously Anton and the team subscribe to and do deliver accounts that are presented in that manner, but they are quite significantly different to a, if you like, a normal set of private sector business accounts.
Yes, and if I can add to that, in terms of those accounts, you're right, Gareth, and you'll find the insurance actually being allocated to the asset itself. In terms of the cost, Councillor Watts, probably every year when we produce the budget statement, and we'll be doing another one in February, there are a couple of detailed appendices, which is more like a traditional profit and loss account. So you'll see lines in there for that. But I can look that out for you. But that's where you'll see things like the actual cost of insurance.
Thank you. I was also intrigued on page 20 under the question, how do you assess the overall control? There's a section towards the bottom there where it goes on about the areas where there is potential for override of controls. And obviously the reporting processes. And then it mentions as an example, because of undue pressure to achieve financial targets. I was quite intrigued by that. I was just wondering if you could expand what is meant by that.
So management override of control, as I say, is a sort of uniform, significant risk for external auditors across all sectors. So not just local authority accounts. It's across public sector, private sector, and I guess it's that risk that management can sort of circumvent the controls or the governance of any particular organisation, which may be for their own benefit or the sort of wider benefit of the organisation in question. So there's an example used in that particular question around, being put under pressure to, deliver a particular financial outturn, and senior members of the finance team in any particular organisation may be tempted to flout, controls or governance in order to deliver on that. Not typically seen in local government, if I'm being honest, but we have seen evidence of that in certain NHS bodies across the country over the years, where there is quite a bit of pressure that's exerted from NHS, IE, and the Department of Health for organisations to hit particular financial targets, and certain organisations, sort of finance directors, have slightly circumnavigated existing controls to deliver an outturn that's acceptable, if you like, to the centre, and then only when things start to unravel does that become apparent, and those organisations have ended up in a very, very difficult financial position. So we're not suggesting that that's happened in any way at Rydale. It's just an example of where management could override the controls in place to deliver a particular outcome that either improves things for themselves or improves things for the organisation. I don't know if that helps, Councillor Wass, or not.
No, that's great. It was just the term undue pressure. I was just wondering which way you were going with it, but your explanations is great. It's more than adequate. Just when you were talking about Deloitte signing off your pension, on page 58, it mentions discretionary benefits. And it says that the authority has powers to make discretionary awards of retirement benefits. I was wondering whether this was in terms of giving people additional lump sums at the discretion of the council, or whether this is part and parcel of their actual pension.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's in the statement of accounts where it says that authorities as an employer do have that right. But in terms of the governance of that and control of that, that's very clearly set out in the council's constitution and financial procedures in terms of what we are allowed to do or not. So I think the statement in the accounts is just a general one, noting that employers have the ability to do that. But as a council, we have strict governance around that.
Okay, thank you. And there was just one that I didn't quite understand. It's to do with the Policy and Resources Committee on page 73. Towards the bottom, it says central services to the public, and I was just wondering what exactly that was encompassing, because it's the adjustments on it is 116,000, and I was just wondering what the services were.
Sorry, struggling to get off mute. I'll need to come back and the breakdown of that to you. Is that? Can you just give me the page?
Yeah,
reference?
page 73. Note to the expenditure and funding analysis. And it's the adjustments between the funding and accounting basis.
Okay, I'll come back.
I think a lot of that will be pensions related.
It is. It is. That the 116 is the figure from last year, and that's showing that 80,000 of that was related to pensions, and the rest capital. But I'll get you some detail.
Great, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Oxley?
Yeah, just observation of the question. I mean, I think we all got excited about the amount of VFM work we were going to do when we were told it was going to increase this year. So I think there's no surprise that it's actually going to take a bit longer, and I think that's in line with the fact that it's been done differently. On a couple of occasions, Gareth, you mentioned, you got them highlighted in yellow, one or two things might pop up, one or two things might pop up. Is that because you're expecting certain things to pop up that you haven't dealt with yet, or just to cover yourself in case they do?
It's probably a bit of both. I mean, I don't envisage anything material to pop up between now and signing off. So it's probably about 10 days since that report was drafted, and there's been a significant level of audit work delivered in that sort of 10-day period since this report was finalised for committee papers deadline. And as I say, I just to reiterate, that in order for us to make significant progress at an audit, it needs the buy-in from Anton and his team to provide the information and deal with the queries that we raise, and that's certainly been the case. So there are one or two points that have come up, but as I say, nothing of any significance, Councillor, to impact on the discussion that you're going to have in a moment around sort of approving the account, subject to Anton dealing with the finalisation of it with us probably in the new year. And in any case, what we will do is we will update this document at the point that we sign off, which is something we do every year anyway, to make sure that all the outstanding work that's listed in it at the present is cleared, because we'll have finished it at that point in order to issue the opinion. And we'll update, particularly Appendix C for any presentational amendments or changes that we identify. If on the unlikely event that we identify a material issue over the next few days that impact on the usable level of reserves at the council, then I suspect what we'd probably have to do is come back to the audit committee, which I think is scheduled towards the end of January. I can see Anton nodding. We'd have to represent it at that committee. But if, as past experience would suggest, that nothing material arises between now and the point that I sign off, we'd just deal with that directly with Anton, and we'd reissue the ISO 260 report as a final document at the point that we sign off. So I can confirm that as of today's date, there still remains no audit adjustments that impact on usable reserves. I think there's been a couple of very minor presentational changes that we've found in the last couple of weeks, but again, nothing to concern members with in terms of this evening's meeting.
Thanks, Graham. I think that's reassuring. I think it's quite helpful. To me, it is the way you've explained that, because it's good for us to understand the speed at which these things work. There's obviously been an enormous amount of work done in the last since this was written that answers some of those questions, and it's good for us to understand that. Yeah,
there has, and again, we were always had a challenge this year around delivery, and I say, and that's not just the Leeds office team of Grant Thornton or Grant Thornton as a whole. All the external audit firms are struggling this year with sort of delivery and capacity. So we were always planning to aim for an end of November sign off for these accounts, but the real thing that impacted on us in the summer was our colleague Jack Walsh, who some of you may recall from previous years. He decided to move on, and there's just a real scarcity of public sector audit specialists out there, Councillor Oxley, that we can draw upon. I don't have a shelf of Jack Walshes that I can just simply pull down from when one disappears. So we've had to rejig our resourcing as a local team, but clearly they were engaged on other audits as well. So when those audits sort of were more or less finalised, we've managed to provide quite a large amount of resource over the last 2 or 3 weeks into Rydale, which has meant this audit's moved on pretty significantly in the month of December, to a point where I don't think we're quite going to make it tomorrow, but we certainly will in early January at the current rate. And again, I could probably spend the entire evening talking to you about the difficulties of external audit in the public sector, and I do think it might be helpful for me and Talina to run a session in maybe January's meeting to provide some of that context, because I've done it at some of my other local authority audit committees, and I think it's been helpful to members that when we say we're struggling to deliver on time and one thing or another, there's a sort of national context behind some of that stuff, and it's not us deliberately trying to be difficult with our clients, but there is a sort of national challenge that both GT and the other firms are facing.
Gareth, if I implied any criticism, it wasn't meant, not at all. I fully understand. Just one final observation. I've got to make it. I ought to know by now, every time I have my supplementary question. You always seem to answer it in your first, answering my first question. So I was going to ask about what happens if you do find something, but you've already answered it. So thanks for that.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. It wasn't really a question, it was just an observation to really compliment Gareth and Anton too on sticking at the task in spite of the capacity issues and the unquantifiable things that may come to throw us off the task. I just think hearing you presenting, Gareth in particular, gives me confidence that, you know, in difficult times you're sticking at it and a good quality of work's being done for a fine fee, I'm sure. But no, it sounds as though the quality of the work's really good, so well done, and I'm heartened to hear that.
If I may, Chair, thank you, Councillor Bailey. Obviously, you and I come across each other at another audit committee, not too far from Malton. I think I would make one sort of further point around the quality of work, and I think the level of sort of the quality bar in terms of public sector audit has gone up quite significantly in the last couple of years, and arguably rightly so. And I think, along with the sort of resourcing challenge that audit firms have got, the other one is that the regulatory oversight from the Financial Reporting Council, the FRC, has gone up quite significantly. So the testing that we're doing with Anton's team now is a lot more detailed, a lot more granularity, particularly around valuation of assets and public sector. And I suppose one key bit of assurance I can give the committee is that in the last year, myself and Talina, we were subject to an FRC review of one of our local government files from 1920, so from last year's audit that took place this year. It wasn't the Rydale file, but it was a file of a council in Yorkshire. And just to assure the committee, that was a very, very detailed review. So the FRC actually took longer in their review of our file than we did of the audit of the council in question. And ultimately, they found that we delivered a very robust and good quality audit. Again, I can feed this back in the workshop session that we do in the new year. But they were really pleased. They'd highlighted some good practice, which is sort of the first time that GT had got some good practice in terms of our work on the valuation of assets at that particular council. And Talina, I don't know what happened to him this year. He must have run over a black cat or something, because Talina had 2 FRC reviews. So as soon as that one finished, he was reviewed on one of his NHS files. And again, that one went really well. And a lot of the people that are involved in the Rydale audit, as I say, have been subject to FRC review this year. So hopefully that gives, you know, Councillor Bailey and the rest of the members some assurance that whilst the audit has taken slightly longer, and longer than is ideal, if we're being honest, for ourselves and indeed for Anton, the audit work is robust, it's of a good quality, and it's been endorsed effectively by our regulator. So I think that is quite an important point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Anton, are we back to you now?
Yes, thank you. I should point out, thanks for the references to the work the team has done, but I do really want to emphasise that it's the team. So it's people like Mandy and Alison and Fu and others in the finance team and across the council who are dealing with the audit and doing some great works. I must acknowledge them because they do all the hard work. I can see Gareth nodding, so I just want to acknowledge them. If there are no more questions, I think it's just a case of asking you to note these accounts as they are at the moment and note the documents that are there, and then hopefully we'll get it signed off very soon.
Thank you to all 3 of you and for such great work, and for your team as well, Anton. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's recommended that members note the RDC informing the audit risk assessment presentation, note the 2020-21 statement of accounts, including the annual governance statement, and note the proposed letter of representation, and note the external auditor's audit findings ISA 260 document. Can we take that by general affirmation? Can we have that by general affirmation? Thank you.
That's recorded, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7 is decisions from other committees. I think everybody, I don't know if everybody's got the Policy and Resources Committee minutes. Has anybody got any comments or questions? No questions. Moving on to agenda item number 8 is the ONS forward plan, and I'll hand that over to Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to update you on items pending for the January meeting. You'll see on page 203 of the agenda there's 7 items listed. I can update that there's an additional 2 items that we'd be looking to add. The first one, you may recall a number of months ago, as Monitoring Officer, I'd advised you with your standards role that we were looking at bringing forward a report on the model code of conduct and potentially adopting that at Rydale. That report will be available to come forward for consideration in the January meeting. The second item, by way of update, a number of members are involved in the Scrutiny task group that's been looking at staff appraisals, which met last week, and we're now looking at pulling together a report summarising the work done and the findings from that review, and it's likely that that will be available to bring forward also to the January committee, and the committee may then want to look at which topic it scrutinises next, as well as finalising the findings from the current topic. Probably just to add with that in mind, Chair, if you are wanting to do an audit workshop session, you might want to consider doing that on a different date to the committee, because with potentially 9 items of business to consider, time might be short on that particular evening. But I'm happy to take any questions on what I've said or the forward plan items generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Is there any questions or comments? No. Oh, Councillor Bailey. Oh, okay. Councillor Bailey.
Well, it was just a comment that I think the work that we did the other day on the appraisals was heartening, and I'd be confident that we'd be able to sign that off in January and get on with the next things to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Gareth?
Thanks, Chair. I think one of the things that's down for January's committee is our audit plan. So that won't be going to January's committee. So that's one less thing, I guess, for the January meeting. I think our audit plan for next year typically goes to the April meeting. And then the only other thing I would say is that, you know, if you do want us to do a session around sort of external audit work generally, more than happy to do that. But that might be better as a separate workshop potentially, or doing it before the start of the formal meeting, because it's typically around half an hour to 3/4 of an hour presentation, including question and answers, that when we've run it at other authorities, if you wish us to do that, of course.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you,
yes,
Chair.
I think that would be useful to myself and perhaps to the other councillors as well. So I don't know your availability on that day, if you could do it half an hour before the meeting, but perhaps Simon could try and arrange something and check that other councillors are available, and yourself, of course.
That'd be fine, Chair. I'm sure we could start at 6, so that's not a problem for myself and Talina.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Moving on to agenda item number 9, any other business that the chairman decides is urgent. I've got no other business. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you, officers. And thanks, Gareth and Talina and Anton.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hope you have a good Christmas and New Year break, and we'll see you in the new year. Thanks,
And
Chair.
you.
Thanks all.
Yep, happy
Cheers, thank
Christmas.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.